Ed O'Keefe is a reporter for the Washington Post, and he now joins me from Capitol Hill. And Ed, what do you make, first of all, of that closed-door vote that played out last night?
I mean, I think, as Trump said, it's just kind of puzzling that with all the things Republicans say they want to work on, they would allow this to be the issue that dominates the first day of school, if you will. It's important to note this was a closed-door meeting of House Republicans only. A majority of them decided that when a rules package is voted on later today that sets the rules of the road for the next 2 years of the House, they want to include this. It ends the independence of what has been a pretty successful ethics watchdog, in that there have been members in recent years who've had to step down or have faced ethical questions after allegations were made to this office. What members don't like is that it's all shrouded in secrecy, that you remain under the cloud of investigation until they've concluded their situation, and you don't necessarily, as a member, have a chance to step in and say, what's this all about? Can we rethink exactly what this investigation should look like? But it's a PR nightmare for them, because here we are just talking about this and not talking about all the other things that Republicans say they want to do over the next few weeks before President-elect Trump takes over the White House and is able to sign legislation that Republicans are presumably going to be passing up here on Capitol Hill.
And so a PR nightmare, but one, is it your belief, I guess, that Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy believed that they could speak out against, again, behind those closed doors, and so derail? Because, again, there are reports that both men did weigh in and were opposed to it. And I do want to point out that Donald Trump, in tweeting what he tweeted today, in fact called the OCE unfair. He simply seemed to question the timing here.
Yeah, exactly. And I think he's hearing the concerns that members in both parties have about this office. Let's be frank. Several Democrats in the last 8 years have faced the wrath of this office. So, conceivably those members would want to weigh in on this. But Democrats are expected to reject the rules package for all sorts of other reasons. But yeah, McCarthy and Ryan last night said, This isn't something we should do this way. We should find another way to sort this out and fix it. Let's not do it through this package on day one. A majority of the Republican members rejected that. Just a few moments ago, the majority leader was asked in a meeting with reporters, does this signal that you guys, once again, are having trouble keeping your ducks in a row? And do you really have firm control of the caucus? And McCarthy's first response, according to colleagues who were there, was, man, what a way to come back to a new year. But really, this is a problem of their own making. It was on front pages all across the country. It's leading newscasts, and it's not what Republican leaders and certainly the Trump transition team wanted the focus to be on as the new Congress begins later today.
And it certainly, again, does not seem to speak to the draining of a swamp, at least anytime soon. Obviously,
no, not at all.
Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy had joined many of their GOP colleagues in hoping to put perhaps the Affordable Care Act there in the crosshairs front and center as they look to manage their caucus and so start checking off some priorities. How do you see that then, again, as we sit really less than an hour now away from the official swearing in of the 115th Congress?
So that process will start here in the coming days, both in the Senate and in the House. It's a complicated legislative maneuver that has to happen. It's a system called budget reconciliation, which essentially has the Senate pass a bill that has to do with spending and sends it over to the House where they can sort out the details and then send it back to the Senate and have it pass essentially, if needed, with just 51 votes, free of the 60-vote threshold that a lot of big legislation needs in the Senate. The problem is there's agreement generally on that the law needs to be changed and that they want to pass something quickly that signals to the American public they have, in essence, started to chip away at what is known as Obamacare. The problem, though, is they don't exactly know what they want to replace it with. And they see the polling that says that the majority of Americans like the fact that young people can stay on it, that people with pre-existing conditions wouldn't face trouble, that women don't get discriminated against by insurance companies where they may have been in the past. And so they've got to find a way to work around that and President-elect Trump's stated preference for those parts of the law and still make it look as if they've really revamped this law, perhaps lowered costs for the average healthcare consumer, and make it look as if they did something. In addition to that, they've got to get a Supreme Court nominee picked. They've got to start work on tax reform. They want to start undoing the financial regulatory reforms of the last few years. a host of things that will all start running into each other and have a good chance of causing further disagreements in what has always been a closely divided Republican conference, both in the House and in the Senate. You've got political things to worry about, you've got ideological concerns and priorities, and you've got a president coming soon who is not necessarily a diehard, devoted Republican and wants to do some things that Republicans here in Congress at least don't like spending a lot of money to rebuild roads and bridges.
Yeah, to your point, the domino effects and the Venn diagrams here do suggest stormy seas ahead. I want to get you out of here on this, Ed. You've been reporting on the confirmation hearings that now loom. Obviously, specifically, perhaps the candidates and the nominees whom Democrats would most like to target, perhaps feel are the most vulnerable. What do you make of the short list that they see, and which do we see as the most difficult ahead?
Well, it's a list of 8 of Trump's picks so far. He'll have to name about 24 to the cabinet level positions, and Democrats are homing in on people like Rex Tillerson, the Secretary of State nominee, Jeff Sessions, who would serve as Attorney General, Steve Mnuchin, who would run the Treasury Department, Betsy DeVos, who would run the Education Department. For a host of reasons, either it's their personal wealth, the lack of government experience, or their ideological viewpoints on things like Obamacare or the future of education in this country, or how budgeting should be done by the federal government. I suspect ultimately they will winnow it down to maybe 2 or 3 of Trump's cabinet picks. Likely Rex Tillerson because of his ties to Russia, maybe Jeff Sessions because of his controversial past when it comes to civil rights and his record when he was an Alabama judge, and perhaps one other just for ideological reasons. Maybe it's Scott Pruitt of the EPA or Andrew Puzder, who would be the Labor Secretary. But either way, Democrats see this as a chance to really begin to hone in on what Trump would do as a president and try to put some markers between Senate Republicans and the president on things like whether or not nominees should be releasing tax returns. Trump didn't do it. Democrats believe that his nominees should, and if they can get Republicans to side with them on that, it would put the party at odds, obviously, on a sensitive issue for the new president.
Well, a sensitive issue, and Ed, it's interesting because, as I mentioned, the Venn diagram, there are a lot of circles here. You mentioned specifically as it regards Rex Tillerson, the questions about his ties to Russia. Also, as you note in your story, he has said that he will only be willing to release tax return information of his and his wife's for the previous 3 years. That is not complete tax returns, or at least not as currently stated. Given the greater context, then, of questions not just with Rex Tillerson's ties to Russia, but obviously with all the questions and all the headlines with Russian meddling in the elections at all, how specific and how bloody a fight do you think we're going to see there?
Oh, I think Democrats see an opportunity here to score some points, or at least try to, in part when it comes to Russia and to Tillerson, because Republicans have expressed concerns about him, no less than John McCain, his buddy Lindsey Graham. Marco Rubio, though he has said he'd support Rex Tillerson, raised concerns about Tillerson's relationship with Putin and his work in Russia. I think there's going to be a broader concern to begin with on the Foreign Relations Committee and ultimately among all senators about whether a Fortune 500 CEO is capable of serving as the country's top diplomat. Does he have a good understanding and a good read of all the different global challenges that will face the next administration, whether it's North Korea, the crisis in Venezuela, or the mess in the Middle East? And I think you'll see Democrats not only hone in again on his personal finances and his business record, but try to really get a sense of whether he has a grasp of what the Secretary of State would have to do. If he doesn't, I suspect that could make it easier for Democrats to suggest that he shouldn't be the guy. And you'll see that again on others, because Betsy DeVos, for example, doesn't necessarily have an education background other than being an advocate for charter schools. The other picks who come from the corporate world have never served in government at any level. That's fine, but it could suggest that they may not have a complete understanding of how government works versus business. Democrats will look for any opportunity they can find in the coming weeks to point that out, and if not stop them from getting confirmed, at least bloody them up along the way.
And considering the past of hearings such as these, it will certainly be theater not to be missed, and we know you won't. Washington Post, Ed O'Keefe, great work here today. We always appreciate the insight, Ed.
Take care, Josh.